We often imagine Viking victory feasts from movies, warriors drinking mead, laughing by the fire, celebrating a hard-won battle, but what we rarely see is what happened to the defeated. When the shields were lowered, many women from conquered communities faced a very different fate. They could be taken as captives, daughters of defeated leaders, wives of fallen warriors, treated not as members of the community, but as spoils of war. Records from slave markets stretching from Dublin to Constantinople show that these captives were treated as valuable property in a wider system of trade. What happened after the mead horns emptied tells a story not of heroic glory, but of organized exploitation. The women were not honored guests at these feasts. They were forced into service for the very people who had just destroyed their homes. Today, we're examining the often ignored fate of the Viking war captive, a story dark enough that it left traces in medieval European legal codes that few people talk about. The battle might end at dawn, but by midday, a different kind of process began. Historical accounts suggest that not every person was treated the same. Young and physically healthy women were particularly targeted, seen as more valuable in the eyes of traders. Chroniclers like Ibn Fadlan, an Arab diplomat who observed the Rus Vikings along the Volga, described a cold and transactional selection process where captives were examined and chosen like merchandise at a market. Those selected could be marked, signifying that they were now considered property to be transported and sold. On the ships, these captives traveled in harsh, cramped conditions. Archaeological finds like the Gokstad ship show iron rings bolted to the deck, likely used for restraints. The sea journeys were uncomfortable and dangerous, with little protection from the elements and very few provisions. Surviving the voyage, however, was not the end of their ordeal, but the beginning of a new and difficult existence. The main celebration took place once the warriors reached a safe harbor. Before the drinking and storytelling, the human spoils were divided. According to Adam of Bremen and other medieval writers, this wasn't random. The leader, or jarl, chose first, then the captains, and only afterward were others allocated by lot. The captives had no say in these decisions. Their lives were rearranged in minutes, reinforcing the power hierarchy within the warband. Legal studies of Norse law codes, such as those analyzed by Regis Boyer, show that these women were not treated as free spouses in the eyes of the law. They remained the legal property of their captors and could be traded or sold. The feast that followed became a bonding ritual for the warriors, while the captives were forced into their new roles, their former identities and communities stripped away. Once the celebrations ended, the practical side of this system took over. Those who died in battle or during the night were buried or discarded with little ceremony. Archaeological evidence from places like Reykjavik shows burial pits with female skeletons that bear signs of violence and hardship, hinting at the dangers captives faced if they resisted or simply could not endure their new circumstances. The survivors were often sent to slave markets in hubs like Dublin, York, and Hedeby. Monastic chronicles record the prices of human beings alongside other goods. A healthy young woman could be priced in silver like a sword or a horse, a human life reduced to a line in a ledger. These markets did not only serve the Vikings. Christian kingdoms and noble households also acquired enslaved people as servants and workers, extending the trade network from Greenland to Constantinople. For those kept in Viking households, life meant long days of forced labor and tight control. Their children inherited a complicated status, neither fully free nor entirely enslaved, marked by their mother's captivity and often described as born in bonds. Behind this localized brutality was a much larger economic engine. Viking expansion wasn't funded by treasure alone. Human trafficking was a major pillar of their economy. A successful raid might bring back silver and goods, but captives could yield even more profit when sold. Targeting civilians wasn't just an act of cruelty, it was an economic calculation. This profit motive led to infrastructure specifically designed for holding people. Excavations at Norse sites reveal windowless rooms with iron rings set into the walls, likely used to confine captives until they were sold or assigned to households. Those who resisted could face severe punishment, and examples like Hallgerd Hoskold's daughter, executed after killing her captor in 968, sent a clear message about the risks of defiance. In harsh winters, captives were among the most vulnerable, often receiving the least food and comfort. Many did not survive their first winter in the north. As the seasons turned and trade routes reopened, these people were moved along well-established paths that connected the Viking world to distant markets. Trade routes determined where a captive might end up. The eastern Volga route carried people toward Constantinople and the markets of the Byzantine Empire. The western routes led toward Ireland, Britain, and beyond. Vikings understood their markets. Different regions valued different skills, appearances, and backgrounds. Captives from various cultures were moved and priced according to what buyers in places like Baghdad, Byzantium, or Scandinavia were willing to pay. Human characteristics became part of the trade logic, as unsettling as that sounds today. This was not a matter of occasional opportunism. It was a large-scale industry. In York, archaeologists discovered a pit containing dozens of female skeletons, many showing signs of poor nutrition and violence. One wore an amber bead, suggesting Scandinavian origin, possibly a woman who tried to return home and failed. These captives were treated as expendable fuel for the Viking Age, valued more for what they could produce or be sold for than for their lives as individuals. To manage such a volume of human cargo, the Vikings systematized the trade. Archaeological evidence points to mass production of shackles and restraints at Norse forges, hundreds of nearly identical pieces, showing a standardized approach. Ships appear to have been adapted to carry large numbers of captives, with adjustments for air and space made not from compassion, but to avoid losing cargo. Deaths in transit could simply be counted as transport losses. The psychological impact was enormous. Captives often had their names changed, languages restricted, and families split immediately after capture. This broke social ties and made resistance harder. Within months, a person could be living under a new identity, far from anyone they knew, entirely dependent on their captors. Even religion could become part of this economy. Christian captives who could read and write were valued as household servants. Their education turned into another selling point. As the supply of foreign captives began to shrink, the system's hunger looked for new sources. One of the most disturbing discoveries comes from a mass grave uncovered in 2019 at the Ribe Trading Center in Denmark. Ground-penetrating radar and excavations revealed 64 female skeletons with signs of shackle wear. 12 of them wore amber beads and jewelry typical of Norse women. This suggests that not all of these captives were foreigners. When external raids no longer supplied enough people, the system appears to have turned inward. Norse women themselves could be forced into the same trade network that once targeted outsiders. The implication is chilling. The pursuit of profit had become so powerful that it eroded traditional boundaries of kinship and community. A society that began by enslaving its enemies eventually risked consuming its own. The Viking world, in this reading, becomes a machine that recognized economic value but not human dignity. The saga of the Viking war captive is not one of romance or adventure. It is a history of systematic dehumanization, where people, especially women, were turned into assets on a balance sheet. From the moment of capture to the mark on the forehead, the iron rings on the ship, and the auctions in distant markets, each stage was designed to control bodies and extract value. The Viking Age is often remembered for daring voyages, skilled seafaring, and glittering hoards of silver. But behind those achievements were countless individuals whose names we no longer know, whose lives were spent in forced labor, displacement, and fear. Their presence is still visible in archaeological bone pits, in genetic studies, and in the quiet footnotes of medieval law codes. Remembering them means looking past the polished image of Viking heroes and acknowledging the human cost that helped build that legend. If you want to uncover more of history's difficult truths that textbooks often overlook, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. What part of the Viking world challenges your image of them the most? Let us know in the comments below.